machine intelligently moving, intelligently doing things through sensors is what constitute a machine, which may be categorized as a, if it is a reprogrammable and multifunctional, then it can be termed as a robot. So you can see that, I think you are able to visualize the first picture, which is of a macro robot. And then what happened is when miniaturized world started, then people started building micro robots, and it was difficult to make micro robots. Then people also jumped into nano robots. So I'll come to this miniaturized world, but first let us talk of macro robot, which is the talk of today and interest of today. What the other two things are, the interest of tomorrow, where I'll tell you that world is moving towards that direction also. So let me first check it out. What is what else can we do with robots? Hopefully this video will be. I am playing a video. I'm not sure because of the connectivity issue, but how many of you have heard that children fall in a bore well and we are unable to rescue? So National Geographic has made a video which is of a foreign country, not only in India. The rescue operation is similar. What happens is a crane comes and nearby the borewell they dig the sand out, and then military operation becomes a national news, and somehow some of the babies which fall in the borewell actually are saved. So I'm trying to play a video of such a thing. I request somebody, if it is audible. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
You have seen that from the thin fellow inside, how tedious and how risky it is. Can't you even, can you think of, something, a robot goes inside and pull out the baby. So what we tried with my team here in Manipal University, Jaipur, is a similar exercise by making a robot. You can see that I'm going to play another video for a small time. So this is the instrument, the robot goes inside, and on a dummy baby, what we do is we figure out where is the space, around the baby, and grip the baby and pull that baby out. created a small 12-inch borewell or 8-inch borewell, and we created a robot. The robot goes inside and is controlled by a person sitting outside. Now, making it programmable, so we made it programmable also, but with the help of human intervention through the visualizing sensors, cameras, it became slightly easier. So we continued with the camera, but it is a robotic arm for rescue in borewell operations. See, it's trying to find out the space around the baby or a dummy baby or a bunny, which we have thrown inside this tube. When it goes around, it is very interesting field actually. So you see that how difficult it is, what methods do we use, and cannot we all make it this technology which I am showing you perfect. So now on the screen it was visible that they have, and see, this is the machine, small machine that we have made, and inside you can see the bunny now. The bunny is being pulled out, and the similar kind of enthusiasm among the team, and they are very cheerful after having this bunny outside. Now this has not been experimented. This has not been experimented on the real time, because though we were called at one of the districts, SP did call us, Superintendent of Police did call us, but by the time we reached the spot, I mean, everything was unfortunately in a bad shape. So I mean that if this technology of robots should be for the societal connects also. Now, for a purpose, if you make a robot which is for society, and that is what should enthuse the listeners of today's talk. My understanding is, just for the sake of fascinations, we should not learn robotics. Robotics should be learned to use it, and for a purpose which actually gives society something back. I think I have one more example. So you can see that there are a lot of people who have an amputation. The hand is what gets chopped off, maybe a military region, or maybe somebody working in farms, thresher machines. So we have a Samiti, charitable trust here in Jaipur. We call Bhagwan Mahavir Viklang Sahayata Samiti. And the director there, Dr. Mehta Saab, asked me to create something like frugal engineering and make a hand which is less costly. Let me tell you, friends, that making hand is not all that difficult. Bhagwan Mahavir is already making, but these are static hands. And what is available in the market is one is, we call that as Alimco hand, which actually uses a lot of stress in your body, gives a lot of stress. So what we were asked, and then if you want something very sophisticated, and the least costly comes from China, which is INR 1 lakh of rupees, minimum INR 1 lakh. And you can think of this money. See, if our Indian brothers and sisters would go for 1 lakh for one hand, how many of them can afford? So the challenge which was given to us was to make a frugal, a less costly hand. And this is what we did with some of our students. And I can show you the picture where all the team is working here. And the team has now opened a company, innovations which has happened in this. And now it's in the Jaipur hand. Like Jaipur foot, we have made Jaipur hand. And continuously we are improving on it. I think there is a small video which I'll show also. You can see that how does it work. So you will have these switches, and these switches are now operated by Myo. You understand the muscle signals. So you can actually close and open the fingers and rotate this wrist also. This is a very old video, and it has improved a lot now. So this is the hand. Now let me come. So this was Jaipur hand. You can make your own hands, and which is robotic, and which actually these motors are switched on by myo signals, the muscle signals. It's a good idea. I mean, if you understand the robotics, you can go for something which is useful to the society, and you can think of your own projects or pick up one of these projects as your own. Now, as I'm talking too much on the hands, let us talk of hand. Look at your hand. So if you see your arm, forearm, and whole of the anatomy of your hand. So if you will look it closely, you will see that there are links and joints. Look it carefully. There is nothing mechanical there, but there are links. Links are made by bones, and bones are surrounded by muscles. Objectivity is to move the link by the joints, about the joints. And how do you power the joints in real human being is by, pulling and pushing muscles and the pulling and pushing the veins there. So you actually get your motion by a powering device, which is your muscle, and your links moves about. I'm talking now more technical terms, so please listen carefully on this. So between two links, there always will be a joint. Look at your hand or whole of your body, whether it is leg, hand, torso, whichsoever. So there will be links, and between links, there will be a joint. Also between two joints, there will be a link. I'm repeating, between two links, there always will be a joint, and between two joints, there will be a link. We have to move the link about a joint and power that movement. So what robotic engineers did is, robotic engineers place the motor at the. Now see the difference. When I said we are making a machine like ourselves, robota, a slave, in our body there is no motor. You just see that there is no motor in our body. So, but human intervention or human intentions to make something, and they were unable to do it muscle-like. They were not able to do how God has done for us. So, but they made a joint and made the joint to move by a motor. Motor can be a stepper motor, motor can be a servo motor, and control that stepper and servo to rotate by an angle. So if you use the rotational joint and just tilt your hand to certain position, gripping a pen, for example, if a pen is lying in front of you, just grip that pen. Now, if you grip that pen, you will see that starting from your shoulder and your forearm and arm has rotated by an angle, theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, as many joints, as many rotations have happened. So a collection of theta 1, theta 2 to theta n has given you a coordinate XYZ. Listen to these words again carefully. So you have a joint space and a Cartesian space. Cartesian space is cubical, X, Y, and Z. You have reached XYZ by using theta 1 to theta n. Rotate your theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, means you rotate your joints by certain angles and you get an XYZ. And this is how human beings are doing. They are not moving straight like gantry. They are not moving in X, Y, or Z. They are actually moving in thetas. And that, as I said, that rotation is not done by a motor, but in real robots, real robotic anatomy, we put a joint and a motor. And motor we control through our electronic circuitry. And controlling a stepper motor and a controlling, say for a servo motor, is what electronics people do. Very easy problem for them. And making a link and a joint is a problem of mechanical engineer. And to control the task, the vision, the sensing of the vision and then acting like that, is some programming has to be done. So that is a task of the computer scientist. So, so to begin with, I mean, every one of you should learn what I'm going to show you now, slightly mathematically. And you need to know the robotic anatomy in these terms of joints and links, the joint notations, the degree of freedom, and robot configuration. Let us start with a simple. So robot will look something like this. It will not be a human being walking or doing something. In industrial robot 4.0 also, only difference will be that will be through web connected and IoT things, and that will be directly connected. You can sit at home and control these things. Like Da Vinci, which does the operation. So will be required to do the very sophisticated operations. There is a robot which has been made by the name Da Vinci, and you see that how versatile that robot is. That actually operates the soft tissues, not damaging the other, and it has been approved. I think one of them or two of the machines, such machines are in, they have placed in Bangalore also. So you can see that you will have, if you see what is on my screen, a kind of robotic anatomy. You will have a waist, right? Waist is like your torso, and consider your body and then your arm. So then in arm, then upper arm, then forearm, in between elbow joints, and shoulder joints may move in theta 1, theta x, theta y, theta z. So it has 3 degrees of freedom. Then your elbow joint may have 2 degrees of freedom. Then your wrist, which may rotate, and then your tarsals and metatarsals, your fingers, your palm twist. These constitute around 26 degrees of freedom. I mean, you can rotate in 26 ways till the end effector, which you call as the gripper, that is the end of your fingertips. You can rotate 26 combinations. But in real time, we do not need to have so many versatility. What we do is we only rotate, or we only have 6 degree, or 6 degree of freedom is also, I mean, a very high degree of freedom. Even we can manipulate with 4 degree of freedom. So what I mean to say and want to convey through this slide is you will have a fixed portion, which we call as the waist. And then you will have something link, which is your arm, which will rotate. And with the rotation theta 1, and then a combination of another rotation theta 2, that is of upper arm, and then a movement of forearm, that is D3. D3 is a linear movement, say, and then a theta 4, and a theta 5 and theta 6, you reach a position in space x, y, z with theta x, theta y, and theta z. That is the idea of going to a particular place. That is when I said that pick up the pen in front of you. You must have done a theta 1, you must have done a theta 2, theta 3, and likewise up to theta 6 or theta 20, and a joint space, that is, we call joint space means theta 1 to theta n. This combination has given you an x, y, z, the Cartesian coordinate. So with a combination of thetas, you got a x, y, z with certain orientation. This is what is done for the controls of individual joints. So for example, to reach an x, y, z, theta 1 should be 20 degrees from the datum. So now you have to rotate your stepper motor by 20 degree. And this 20 degrees simultaneously rotating other thetas. So not only theta you are controlling the speed of theta also, theta dot and theta double dot also. So you control the acceleration, velocity, and net motion of a motor at each and every joint to create a joint space vector to get, and the output is reflected or manifested in terms of Cartesian coordinate, that is x, y, z. And once you reach there, you delta increment is theta. Delta means small theta increment. So 20.001 degrees, say. Instead of 20 degree, if you slightly rotate more, your grip will tighten the object. And that soft touch or hard grip has to be sensed. Otherwise, say if it's a glass, it will break the glass. So if you slightly rotate more, it will start gripping. And that manifestation is nothing but a joint space movement only. So this is how we give force to pick something. So now the concern is, so if I know my XYZ through some sensors, that is my eyes see where is my pen lying or where my mobile is lying. So I know the depth of it. Once I know the depth XYZ coordinates, I'll rotate my hands. So in robotics, this rotation of hands by theta 1, theta 2, theta n, that is motion in joint space, will manifest itself in a matching of position of my end effector, the end of my fingertips, to that particular object which I want to manipulate. Now this can be screwing a bolt, this can be putting a lid on your pen, anything. So you have to first go to that coordinate. So first move the joint angle. And how do I get the joint? So next comes the joint transformation, or for example, how do I reflect that point to the base point? Suppose my mobile is lying at some place with a datum. The datum is my torso. So for my waist says that my mobile is lying 10 centimeter in X direction, 5 centimeter in Y direction, and minus 10 centimeter in Z direction. I know I have to reach there. Well, that point has to be reflected in all the coordinates which are assigned at the joints. So let us look at the second step of what we do after knowing configuring our robot, whether it is 6 degrees of freedom or 4 degrees or 3 degrees. 3 degrees will not move. So a robot anatomy will be something like this. You will have a base, an arm, and a wrist, and the end effector, and the workpiece. So I have explained this slide in more words, but I'll keep it for 10 seconds to have your views on it. And of course, there will be two links, and in between there will be a joint, and between two joints there always will be a link. End effector has to reach the workspace. So now going forward, what kind of joints that we have in our robotics is, you can see that there are a number of joints which you can make. God has made joints which are multi-degree of freedom. For example, if you look at your shoulder joint, it is a ball and socket joint, right? If you make a mechanical joint, ball and socket, it is possible. But to control the motion, that means exactly rotate that ball and socket in X, Y, and Z direction, is a tricky till today. So instead, we prefer in robotics single degree of freedom joints. And single degree of freedom joints can be revolute joint, like you can see the A, the figure which is given as A. So revolute joint, easily understandable through the picture, is the top view of it. Then you may have a prismatic joint that simply moves in linear direction, B, figure B. Then figure C is rotary joint. You can see that the two axes are perpendicular to each other. And similarly, a twist joint where two axes are collinear. So many kinds of joints can be there. Now, what we need to do here is, so combining these, there are very many kinds of robot configurations that can be made, like your gantry robot. Gantry robots, 3D type of joints, 3 prismatic joints you do, which moves in X, Y, and Z. So you have these, you must have seen in some of the industries. So keeping that in mind, you have many configuration that all moves prismatically. All three joints are prismatic. So you can see that first joint moves up, second joint moves in Y direction, and third is in X direction. So one is in Z, one is in Y, one is in X. And you get a workspace like this. That means within this cuboid, you can actually operate on any of the workpiece by moving certain distance in all the 3 directions. So having this done, we may have a RPP type kind of thing. Look at the geometry, that cylindrical geometry if you want to make. So you must have one rotary joint at least. So you see one theta direction and 2 D directions. So this particular robotic configuration moves in vertical direction and lateral direction, but also rotates, creating a cylindrical geometry. So this type of configuration we called as RPP. Similarly, you can have a spherical robot, which is RRP. So you can move in azimuthal angle or zenithal angle. That means 2 rotations and 1 prismatic. So you will have a spherical robot. I mean, manipulating, how do you want to manipulate a particular instance? You may choose a gantry robot. So sometimes, see, your industry do not require cylindrical manipulations. They only require to pick and place from the top. And therefore, what you do is, you have only PPP kind of robot there, but in more sophisticated spaces where you have to bolt something from an angle and you have to put something on the top. And if these kind of things are there, then you really need a spherical robot. So you can make these kind of combinations of joints to create different kind of shapes. That is work environment in which your robot can work. So there are a number of such things which you can easily find out in your what you call textbooks. So, but this figure out what kind of design are you making. So similarly, RRR is a revolute or articulated robot, and SCARA is a special category, which are 4 joints, RPRR. This is called SCARA configuration, selective compliance assembly robotic arm. And your wrist, if you see that it is like it has three motions: yaw, pitch, and roll. So if you see that yaw, pitch, and roll means you can move your wrist up and down, you can move it sideways, and you can also rotate, twist it. So these three angles can be obtained at wrist joint by using such a simple configuration which is shown in front in your screen. So have the first 3 degrees of freedom, RRP, RPP, PPP, and then put a wrist there. And with this, you have a very high flexible robot, what we call in a dexterous robot. We call it dexterity means manipulability from many angles. So higher the dexterity is, higher is the manipulation ability from all directions. So those kind of things, and you can make by having a particular configuration and then putting the wrist over it. This is mechanical configuration. Now suppose I am showing you that if this particular wrist has been attached to certain robot and a point is defined at the faceplate. Suppose a point is defined on a frame XYZ on the faceplate. Am I audible? Somebody can endorse. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Audible, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So put simply a frame on the faceplate XYZ and define a point on that XYZ. Okay. Now, how much should I rotate, or how much that point is visible to the pitch of it? So, I mean, I have to transform that point from one frame to the previous frame to the previous frame to the, I mean, and you go back to your fixed end. So this is called transformation. So there are rotational transformation and translatory transformation. That is the next step. We will know by this. This is called forward kinematics, and that is a very important thing. For example, if you have a robot like this, so you have a base frame. So base frame is X0, Y0, and Z0. And the final frame on which an object has to be is tool or end effector frame. So this XYZ of tool or end effector frame will be sensed by the sensor, which may be a CCTV camera or CCD cameras, or infrared ranging, or whatsoever ranging system or sensing system. You actually find out first the coordinates of tool or end effector frame. It has to reach to the object. So that particular sensing has been done, say for example, and then you have a sensing of the base frame also through the same sensor mechanism. All right. In between, on all joints, we fix up the frames. These frames will be rotated and translated with respect to the previous frame. And how much this point of end effector is visible with any of these frames is what is the study, mathematical study, in what is we called as dynamic analysis or forward kinematic analysis in robotics. What it will give you is, with the transformation matrix, given a θ1, θ2, θn, you will be able to tell how much is XYZ. I am repeating. If you remember what I said in the beginning, joint space will give my Cartesian space coordinates. A rotation of each and every joint, θ1, θ2, θ3 to θn, will tell me how much is XYZ. So how to get it is by having each of these theta's at each of these joints. That means reflect this point on each of the frames. How it is done, let us look at it. The intention is to reflect tool end effector to the previous joint, and so on and so forth till base frame. So the transformation matrix, which I'll be calling as 0, superscript 0, capital D, transformation, subscript n. If there are n number of frames, the nth frame reflected to 0th frame, how it is transformed is the first thing. And by using the transformation matrix, I'll be able to tell that how much is XYZ for a given θ1, θ2 to θn. This is what is taught in the robotics course as the first step. And an algorithm with this which comes is called as Dennavit-Hartenberg algorithm. So this is the first thing that you'll read in robotics books. And I think this particular reading and understanding will take you a few hours. But I am trying to use my wisdom to show you within 10 or 15 minutes I'm just concentrate on this. Suppose there is a point P, and this position and orientation of a point P in a coordinate frame, you know, right? So if you know the point P in a frame, which of course to me is n-effector frame, and then you define that point in the first frame as 1P. 1P is the Px, that is the distance in x direction, in the x cap direction. Then Py, that is the y distance along y cap of the first frame. First frame, I am talking that in this case, let us assume it is the end-effector frame or any frame. In any frame, if there is a point P at a distance Px, Py, and Pz, then 1P will be defined as 1Px x cap plus 1Py y cap plus 1Pz z cap, which can be written in vector matrix notation like 1P is equal to a vertical or a horizontal transformation. So I think this is simple, a vector matrix notation of a point P. Distance of the point P is Px, Py, and Pz. If any point Px, Py, Pz has to be defined in a frame, it will be defined like this: Px x cap plus Py y cap plus Pz z cap. All right, so this was simple. Now let me try to map it to the other frame. Suppose the same point, now do not go on the figure here because it is complicated and require certain amount of time to visualize this figure. But the mathematics is simpler on the right hand side, that I'll explain. See, these slides will be also sent to the organizers. So you'll have access to these slides. So you can go back on these slides. So see that if I say, now look at the right hand side, the same point 1P, I have already defined as Px x cap, Py y cap, Pz z cap. But in second frame, if I have another frame UVW, you can see that apart from XYZ frame, I have another frame UVW, which is rotated to XYZ. It is not translated. Suppose at the same point, I have another XYZ, which I have rotated in XYZ direction, and now I'm calling it as UV and W frame. So let me define the same point P in frame 2, which is my UVW frame. Suppose in the second rotated frame, the X direction is represented as U cap direction, and Y cap will become V cap and W cap. So in the second frame, suppose the distance in U cap direction is PU. In V cap direction, it is PV. And W cap direction, it is PW. I am repeating. If you have a frame XYZ and there is a point at a distance PX, PY, and PZ, the first equation is very well understandable. Imagine at the same origin, if you rotate randomly in 3 directions, X, Y, and Z, and get another frame UVW, this same point will be along U cap about a certain distance, which I am calling as PU, in PV in V cap direction, and PW in W cap direction. So the same point is defined differently in 2 frames, which are rotated to each other. Can I represent 1P as 2P? Can I represent, given 1P, can I show it in 2P? And how do I do it? So 1P, as you see, so this is a dot product, right? So X cap dot 2P. So there is a vector 2P. If I want to project it on the X cap direction, so we do the projections, no? Cosine theta. So cosine theta on the X direction. Similarly, the angle between Y cap and the vector will be the Y projection and Z cap as the Z projection. So we projected them on the X, Y, and Z of the original frame, getting my 1P X back as X cap dot 2P, Y cap dot 2P, and Z cap dot 2P. Just concentrate on the first line. Also, sorry, first 2 columns. What I am doing is I am projecting 2P on X cap or X cap on 2P, whichever you want to. So once you project, that is a dot product. Projection is a dot product. And X cap being a unit vector. So it is actually a projection of 2P on X cap, the unit vector. And when I do this and I put the 2P in place, I'll get an equation like 1Px is equal to x cap dot 2pu u cap plus x cap dot 2pv cap plus x cap dot 2pw w cap, and similarly so and so forth 1py 1pz. I am holding it for a minute. Look at this, what I have done. Same point P defined in XYZ and same point P defined in UVW. And how do I get the 2P, that is the point defined in UVW, to 1P is by doing the projections. The vector I project on X cap and vector I project on Y cap and vector I project on the Z cap. And the projection is nothing but the dot product. So unit vectors X cap, Y cap and Z cap, and the product dot product will give me my vectors 1px. So, so from here, if I write in vector matrix notation, I get something like 1px, 1py, and 1pz as one vector. And in between, you get a rotation matrix. Rotation matrix is how much u cap is rotated with respect to x, how much is v cap rotated with x cap, and so on and so forth. So I get a rotation matrix 1r2. And then you have a 2px, 2py, and 2pz. So if I want to transform 2px, 2p to 1p from one frame which is rotated to the other frame, if it is only rotation, I get a transformation, rotational transformation like this. So first thing that we do in forward kinematics is rotational transformation. And suppose now this is also translated. Suppose that P was having a UVW and an XYZ. Look at this cuboidal box. You have a frame UVW and you have a frame XYZ. And not only this is rotated with each other as in the previous case, but is in this case, if it is only translated, that means suppose UVW is at a distance dx, at a distance dy, and at a distance dz. That two frames are now not rotated with respect to each other, but only translated in x direction, y direction, and z direction. And therefore, the same point P as seen in XYZ, that is 1P, will be nothing but the x in 2 plus dx along x cap plus x in P and dy y cap plus 2pw dz z cap. So therefore, you will have 1P as a translatory matrix. 1P, and if you combine the rotation and translation, then this unit matrix, that is 1 1 identity matrix 1 1 1 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 1 will be replaced by your rotational matrix, something like this. If suppose both of them, the rotation as well as translation happens, then your overall transformation matrix will happen like this. That 3 by 3 will be your rotational matrix, 3 cross 1 will be your translation matrix, and then 0 0 0 is your perspective matrix, and sigma, that is 1, will be your scaling factor. So you get a transformation matrix, and if I have to transform from one frame to other, I keep pre-multiplying them and get it up to baseline. So I think if I put the thetas there, I'll get the real values there, and I'll solve a problem for this for you to understand it more clearly. Suppose
so
the
here,
coordinate.
I have one quick question. So that scaling factor is only one value. What if we have different scalings in X, Y, and Z direction? Is that possible?
It is enlarging. That is actually what happens is through camera we have a perspective.
No, but
so the three. No, with one we are enlarging by same amount in all the directions.
okay.
That is the sigma factor.
Okay. So in say for example computer graphics, we may stretch something in one direction and leave it unchanged in other two directions. Then it will not be applicable in that situation.
No. Then you do the perspective. That means you enlarge in x direction. There are 0 0 0. You put some value there.
Okay.
So in x direction, suppose you want to enlarge in two dimensional. So put a perspective that through perspective vision, this dimension has got enlarged by this much amount.
Okay. So this is a homogeneous enlarge, zooming in or zooming out.
Correct. And inhomogeneity is more complicated, so I'm not including it here in the first go lectures.
Okay.
So if we really are interested, then that thing should also come. But we do play around because it is not a complicated environment in real time. It is not that complicated that we keep enlarging in XY inhomogeneously. That may be of interest to academician. For you and me or somebody who wants to make a difficult paper, and so having students life, let us make it easy and tell them that yes, in real time we only need some enlarge. For example, uh, it's normally the perspective which plays. No, camera will take a sense of the object and grasp it, and that grasping will be through a perspective where some of the dimensions get enlarged, and that is a perspective part of it.
Okay.
So I think I am able to answer that for the students
Yes,
also
yes.
here. And then a difficult task. I'm trying to do the difficult task, that I'm trying to concise my lectures, at least giving some glimpse of mathematics which goes. And mathematics is not difficult, as you have seen here. It is only transformation and getting theta to x and x to theta. So one is, if I have thetas, if I get x by transformations, that is called forward kinematics. And if I have the other way around, then it is called inverse kinematics. And through inverse kinematics, and then when I get my thetas, then what I do is part has to come into picture. And then you have another stream which comes up, which is called your PD, PID, Lyapunov control, and all those theory, state space variables, and everything will come into the control parts. So that is the perspective of what we are looking as robotics, which seemingly is fascinating, goes with certain amount of mathematics. But if you realize a robot, that I have shown you, that if you make a robot which rescues a life in borewell, which has its own sensors, breathing devices, because down there will be no oxygen, and if your robot can take some oxygen cylinder along with it, no human being going on, no 24 hours required. So simply dipping somebody as a robotic machine, which finds out space around the trapped body, trapped kid, and pulls it out without harming. And that is another thing that we must have seen some movie also. I'm not remembering that name, Rajnikant, where a robot was started harming human being. And that is the first rule of robotics, that robots being slaves should not harm us back. They should not multiply themselves. A machine can, if you think of that kind of intelligence, which is still an imagination, but you do not know what will happen after 100 years, because our students here can actually think, and their next generation may think 2 steps ahead. So these are the things which we are on the verge. We are somewhere, whether we are in the middle of the storybook or towards the end, we don't know. So maybe we have started reading this robotics book in 1920s with the advent of the robota word, and now we are somewhere in between. Let us see how this stream flourishes after 100 years. There may be something which is exactly what is being told in that particular movie possible. I mean, what mathematics and what intelligence goes inside is quite perceptible. So let us look from that point. Let me give you an example, and coming back, suppose the coordinate of point P in frame 1 are 3, 2, and 1, which is easily understandable. X direction 3, Y direction 2, and 1 is the Z direction. Now suppose the position vector P is rotated about the Z axis by 45 degrees. All right, what has happened is, first the object was lying straight and there was an XYZ of it. Now suppose that object has been rotated 45 degrees. So in assembly operation, the object is coming from a 45-degree angle. So how much should your thetas? So theta is 45 degree. So how much your XYZ will be? So rotation matrix, if I put, and by simple R rotation and multiplying it by the 1P, that is 3 to 1, you get something, a position like XYZ of the rotated matrix. So this is how your theta, if you rotate by theta, cos 45, sin 45, and sin 45, cos 45, and you are going to get this theta. Yeah, sorry, this position. So with simple mathematics, now you reach this particular point. So that is how you do it. And transformation and addition, rotation, if both happens, then another exercise has been given which you can go through. So what I mean to say is, forward kinematics, inverse kinematics, these are the 2 steps you do first. And if we are able to do this vector matrix multiplication, pre-multiplication, and that happens through your programming, and then you control your joints. And then you take the dynamics and controls part of it. So this is what is a robotic study will take you to, which is currently being done. But in Industry 4.0, the controls will be through IoT things. I mean, sitting in your chamber, you may be able to control robots. You may be able to change programs. Sitting in another city through your internets, you might be playing around with devices which are robotic in nature. So, that is what is being expected today, and I mean possible today, which we are all doing. Having said that, there is another field which is developing, and this is more interesting, which I wanted to tell to the students of this particular interaction session by TechIP 3, that not only in this direction there is a lot of possibility of macro robots, but also one new field which is coming up is miniaturized world. I mean, everything is happening at a smaller level. So we say that, let me say that whose world is this? So do you know how many ants are there on the earth? I mean, we feel that we are the one who control the earth, but who is actually controlling the earth? We don't know, right? So we have seen this effect in Corona, where we were inside our houses and nobody stopped the ants to come out. Just giving an example and analogy. So you see that there are 10,000 trillion ants on earth by a rough estimate of National Geographic. You just type it out, 10,000 trillion, and humans are only 7.2 billions. And they are more organized. And they are actually small sense of ourselves. I mean, they are living beings. Human beings are living beings with a brain. So if a small device like an ant with a small computer chip there, and that can act very, very, I mean, a strange manner. So world actually makes smaller things survive more than the bigger things. You have seen that bigger sizes have vanished from Earth because they required more power to move, they required more food to survive, and nature didn't actually recognize them. There is a very, very high attention of scientists on smaller world trying to make smaller robots. In my previous lecture, just one liner I have told at Techno NGR, that suppose there is a smart dust, a simple particle which has a small camera and which has a small circuitry which is projecting in a room for terrorist activity. So it is actually surveillance device. It's a robotic device. It is flying around small dust particle and then intelligently acting on some suspicious activity. It is possible today because manufacturing technology has reached that point, which we call as nanotechnology or microtechnology, micro electromechanical systems. So the interest also some 20 years back or 30 years back also went on to smaller robots. You see, small things, 10,000 trillion ants, they must be imagining and talking to each other. What is this? So we talk that how many tigers are there. They must be talking how many humans are there. And they are more organized. So making smaller robots, and for what purpose? So there are a lot of purpose for them. You see what we can make, you can see that there is a small gear with this ant. We can make smaller things than this. In fact, we have started engineering with atoms. This is a real picture, and this is the most famous picture in miniaturized world. So making a small gear, you can see it is an ant is holding it. It has some few micron by diameter, lesser than your width of the hair. So as I said that the nature actually have millions and millions of submicron species like your virus. Your coronavirus is changing every day and coming in with different strains. So millions and millions we are finding them surviving. And whereas mammoth has gone from the nature, larger sizes maybe 10 or 100 or 200 or 1000. Our size species are not available. So why not thinking of making smaller devices and smaller robots, not only devices, but robots. And in this direction, you see the nature actually plays around in smaller domains only. The colorful things which we see around are not actually pigments. They are actually a play around of nano texture. So the texture actually, the interference comes, so the light interference, so making it colorful in different fashion. So We have just started pursuing the engineering at smaller domains, especially what the context considers is in next industry revolution, we may have nanorobots also. And what our nanorobots will do is, it is something like in 1976, late Sir E.M. Purcell has said, swallow the doctor. So imagine a doctor going inside the body and doing the surgery. And that is nothing but a robot going inside your body and doing the surgery if some artery is blocked. Why not? When the technology has developed in that direction, why not? So one of my group is doing hard research in this direction, and we are one among some 24 groups across the globe which do a lot of research on nanorobots. And let me show you that smaller dimensions. So you will be able to use dielectrophoresis to separate out particles. You can see that one black kind going on, one is simple forcing by doing a simple dip here and applying electricity across. So they have separated the cancer cell. You can see that one bigger cell has gone on one side. So if there is a blood cancer, you can separate the cell. On the lower video, if you see, in the lower video, you will see that bigger dimension cells will go in one direction because we have given an indent here, changing the electric field of lines. The smaller dimensions are very useful. So in these lines, we were thinking of micro robots. They are difficult to manufacture. Nanorobots are easier. So nanorobotics is maybe used for handling objects with very small dimensions. So you want to learn about the world of ants, you have to become having that small camera or that small object to go inside the ant world. Or you want to do the micro assembly. Suppose your mobile is not working today. Maximum you will do is you will throw it away. Why? We can actually repair it, no? If there is some circuit which has got burnt off, which is not visualized by eyes, but if I have a micro robot, we can actually make it. If I ask you to throw a car because some pipe has got broken, is it possible? No. So similarly, when there are small devices all in our hands, why do we throw them, creating a junk? So micro robots, smaller robots, biotechnology, medical health, maintenance and inspection, monitoring and surveillance, everywhere. And if you want to read more about it, just type this IEEE robotics 1/microrobotapplications.pdf. If you type it on Google, you will get the complete story of why micro robots. So this is another dimension which is going to come up in the next industrial world. And you see that when I go talk about smaller world, the robots which we see imagining walking around will not walk, because modes of motion normally is walking, crawling, hopping, flying, and swimming. But in nano domains, only flying and swimming is possible. So robots, smaller robots will not walk, crawl, or hop. So what I say is, it actually is a domain where so many things are denied, and I call it na and no nano. So locomotion will neither be crawling nor be walking for a robot. It will be swimming. You must have seen that smaller particle or smaller things cannot walk or crawl because of a lot of friction, adhesion, and stiction. So all these things will not allow them to do their performance. They have to fly and swim. So even smaller objects, you must have seen, most of them are flying, or swimming. So first difference that will come from macro robot to micro robot in next generation robotics is mode of motion. Mode of motion will be walking and crawling. As I said, that this concept has come in 76 around, where Sir E.M. Purcell has said that why don't we swallow the doctor? And today we do not have an artificial nanorobot. But what people are doing is they are looking at sizes nature works at and how do they work at. The technology which we have achieved is engineering with atoms, that we have written with atoms letters. For example, you can see that IBM written with xenon atoms. We can do this much of engineering today. We have made a nano car. But going forward, it is very much possible. If we have reached this stage, only 10, 20, or 30 years in your lifetime, students, you will see that these things are coming up, because so many groups across the globe are working on this next generation robotics. So you can see that one of my work which NASA took up, and you have a swimming nanorobot. So I'll repeat this video again. You must be having a flagella. So what you must have seen in how do biological move in nano size. You see that biologicals are something very near to what I'm talking about. So they fly or swim. Very rarely they crawl. And how do they fly or swim is three ways. And the three ways are shown here. Either they have a flagella, or they have a motor which we call as myosin fiber motor protein bundle. The second figure here tells you that there is a motor protein bundle which carries things along that bundle. Or you have what is called as advancing cell on a substrate by adhering gel. That means it actually sticks and then slips, then again stick and then slips. This is the first method, schematic representation of advancing cell on a substrate. There is a cell body, and what it does is it protrudes itself. Adhering gel is there and non-adhering. As soon as adhering gel is there, cell body moves forward. Similarly, it again moves forward by pushing its gel. So, but the best method is flexible ores, that it has a flagella, for which I have just now shown you the video. So looking on to these points, friends, my group actually started making analysis of flagellar motion. A lot of research have already happened in this direction. My suggestion to some of you who would like to take this next generation robotics, which is nanorobotics, is you can think of your own experimentation. See, macro robot is fascinating, and there is a lot of understanding, and field is saturated on the mechanical sides and designs. Almost people are, many groups are working on it. But going forward, these are, or else do the macro robotics with a societal intent, like you're making a robots for rescue of borewell or something like that. So my suggestion is, if some of you want, and then look at what we have done here with flagella, still we have not done anything on the powering of nanorobots. How to power that? If a flagella has to flap to make the motion forward, then how do I make my flagella flap? A motor, that small motor is not possible. How nature does it? By converting ADP to ATP, adenosine triphosphate to adenosine diphosphate. There is a chemical reaction, and controlled chemical reaction powers the cells there. If you have cell motion, they are actually powered by some chemical reaction. We do not have any technology, anything, and this field is quite open. So I'm still, the group or across the group, they are stuck up with how to power the nanorobots. In real time, when you have a robot in industry today, you might have a fixed robot. And the fixed robot, the supply comes from your electric power lines. There cannot be an electric power line for a nanorobot which is inside your body. So these are challenges, and if somebody makes it as an interest, and the solutions are there. So there are many transduction and transmission systems which have been already studied. There are issues, but they have been studied. There's a hydraulic, electrical, chemical, many ways people have tried, but no matured up solutions are coming till date. So what happens is, we may have challenge on board and off board kind of thing. And self-generation is something which we can think of, but this is powering. Now, what we have done is to, if there is a power available to flap the flagella, then to increase the efficiency is what my group has done by making branched flagella. So flagella with cilia we must have heard of. So we have made branched, and I'll show you a lot of these, and a lot of public have already done with flagella. And we made an experimental setup also. I'll show you that experimental setup. And this experimental setup is not on the nano size domains. What we need to do for experimental setups is scale them up by using Buckingham Pi theorem. So we have scaled up the dimension using Buckingham Pi theorem, by which the environment around these flagellas will be very thick and viscous by scaling it up. So we used that Buckingham Pi to scale everything around them, and then did experimental setup. So what we did was, you can see that to create that flagellar motion, we introduced a motor and a mechanism. So we first oscillated it without the flagella. And in this, what happens is we can see the cantilever, which is moving a vertical motion. So with this horizontal oscillatory motion, how much is the thrust which is coming on the flagella? And then next, what we did is we added flagella with the environment. So next video that I'll show you is with the environment. So this is the one, there is a bucket and silicon is inside this bucket, and we have added a flagella to the oscillatory mechanism, which is you can see that now the additional power. So you can see that cantilever now oscillates more. That means there is more thrust. If something flaps like a flagella, then there is a horizontal thrust. And that thrust is what we obtained. And we figured out that as we make this flagella more branched, there is more thrust in it. And therefore, there is a possibility of actually propelling a nano robot or making a nano swimmer. So some of you who might be interested, I have a lot of publications here. We are published in IEEE Transactions. We are published in Bionanoscience, ASME Journal, and my group have the experimental facilities also on nanorobots, but at a scaled up level. That is Baki, as I said, that it's a bigger experimental setup depicting the smaller size behavior simulations. So there are a lot of things robotics is going to bring in our future with the revolution which is happening around. Technologies are developing, internet is developing, the cyberspace is developing, and most of the things are happening online as this lecture itself. I'll stop here. There is a lot of things which we can be talked about. A lot of mathematics are there besides this, then the control system which is needs to be understood. I'll thank everyone for listening to me and request if there are any questions, I am ready to take them up. Over to the organizers if there is anything we can be of help now.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful session. I get some questions from the participants. The first question is that how AI can help make supply chain sustainable? I repeat the question, sir. How AI can help, how artificial intelligence can help make supply chain sustainable?
So to me, actually, the answer is that there are factors in supply chains which are non-deterministic and stochastic, which changes the randomness changes of those variables. And I'm giving you only one aspect of it. So in supply chains, there are delays, there are possibility of stuck up, the clogging. So and these are not deterministic in nature. And in these cases, the AI is the best tool. I mean, where you have fuzzy logic and where you have interpretation method using the networks, neurals, and etc. So that is one thing where we must use the AI.
Okay. Sir, what is the continuous path control in robots?
Okay, so as I said that if I have to move an object from x1, y1, z1 to x2, y2, z2, I need to take a path to pick the object from first coordinate to the second coordinate. Now, one strategy can be point-to-point control. I am not interested in between path. But in that case, the accuracy may be less because I may not land up at x2, y2, z2. I have to follow the incremental path. So continuous path control is θ1, delta θ1 plus delta θ2. At each and every instant, I define a path. So moving from point 1 to point 2, I define a trajectory. And the trajectory is continuously controlled, and each and the smaller increment and joint space is controlled.
Okay,
continuous path control.
Thank you, sir. Sir, what are the different types of humanoid?
What are the different types of humanoid? I mean, my question is humanoid, do they really exist? I have heard something which came from a few companies like Honda. There is a robot which walks on two legs, and the intentions are there. Different kind is a, if you want to talk in those terms, I can say two-legged robots and a wheeled robot. Otherwise, I am not getting this question. What kind of humanoid?
Okay,
Humanoid is an intention till date. I am sure that there is nothing like N. Sharma which is existing today.
sir, it is based on types of males and females. There are different types of humanoids are exist on the.
No, that's something which is not a. I don't take that kind of thing. Humanoids are humanoids. There will be they will not be gender bias. There will be nothing like a gender in it, and
Okay.
it will be a walking robot. It may be a perceptive robot. It may be a surveillance robot. Maybe a military robot, and these kind of things. It may be a nuclear robot which goes inside, but nothing like a female robot or a male robot. I don't take it.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. I big thank to Professor N.N. Sharma, sir, for his efforts to deliver wonderful sessions on robotics automation for Industry 4.0. I thanks to provide valuable information about real-time application of robots in different fields as an industry, in medical field, in agriculture. Thank you, sir. Pankaj Purwal,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you very much, sir, for taking out time. We're sorry that there was this misunderstanding.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Pankaj, and the others members of the organizing team. It was actually a lesser of understanding on my part. I thought something else, but it happened, and I'm traveling, and I have to stop on the side by hotel, and I hope I was able to do some justice to what was expected, because it was a sudden thing, and my sincere apologies for this gap. But I hope something was told in the sense that how robotics is growing and how it will be useful in 4.0, and what are the newer fields which are coming up. And my open invitation, if somebody wants to talk more, my email is with you. Please share the email ID. I have a complete group which is working on nanorobots currently. Macro robots I have left because that is a very costly business. And I tell you that to make a bigger robot, we need around, say, 10 lakhs to 20 lakhs of INR, Indian rupees. And that is something which will end up only in a academic thrust satisfaction. So that's why I left and went to the nanorobots. So thank you very much, Dr. Pankaj. So with your permission and best wishes to the students, if you allow, can I leave now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can leave. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Abhishek?
Yes, sir.
Jitendra.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
sir is there, but sir is not the host. I'm making them host.
Okay. So we can.
Yes, Abhishek, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. You can end then the meeting.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Bye, sir. Take care.